Another PolitiPod Live. Tonight we'll cover the State of the Union, judges, courts, and the legal world, the Epstein slow boil, and the Trump dump. We'll also have our segments, international news, and election central. I'm Tom Bickle.
And I'm Hannah Soldner.
And I'm Matt Nisanoff.
And tonight we'll start with the State of the Union.
And it was good to hear the response to the State of the Union that was done by the new governor from Virginia. And I thought she handled it beautifully. I think she made excellent points. Did you guys see the response?
I didn't catch all of it. I caught very little.
Gotcha. I thought she was on target, and I also thought it was very good that there were a number of senators, particularly senators, but there was a number of people who just didn't show up at all. And I think that that's really the right response to the whole thing, as far as with this guy, that it's just worth skipping. There's nothing that's going to be particularly truthful. There's not going to be anything that's going to be anything other than his regular campaign rally bullshit material. And I think that the best way to handle it, frankly, was to just skip the whole thing, which it looks like we all did. I mean, do you think that the content at all had any? Have you heard reports of anything that was done during it that seemed worthy of policy or worthy of governmental attention?
You know, it's interesting. So I followed along with a live whatever commentary on it, or just not necessarily commentary, but like live updates. And then I watched a couple of people's thoughts about it. Anything that I feel like verged on potentially interesting. I just feel like, like there was a couple, like the sort of keeping members of Congress from, using insider investment because they have insider information and some things like that. But I feel like a lot of that stuff, it just feels so much like it's going to be built full of loopholes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole thing was a national waste of time and, frankly, an abuse of the public airwaves.
I didn't watch the live presentation. I just couldn't imagine sitting there through it. I've seen the man give speeches before. Never once has it been worth 10 seconds of my time. None of it. So I didn't, a little bit out of spite, I didn't want to contribute to any ratings. If anything, I wanted to contribute to a deficit, so I didn't watch. Like Hannah, I caught a little bit of blow-by-blow analysis after the fact to try to keep up, but I didn't see anything exciting. The next morning, I started to watch a replay, and it was just immediately chest-thumping, utter whole cloth, made from whole cloth lies. All the winning, everything's back. We're the hottest country. I inherited a mess. Just all this nonsense. It was all just junk. It was pretending that the house isn't on fire, and pretending that ICE hasn't murdered multiple citizens and people in this country with no due process, with no reason for it. And I got pretty sick of it pretty fast. And I caught a few glimpses later. He congratulated the hockey team, and it was sort of more of a pageant than it was a State of the Union. You mentioned that some people boycotted. They didn't show, or they showed up somewhere else, someone else's little tea party. The counter messaging, that's great. I heard it said that half of all Democrats did not show. What was the gentleman's name? Al Green had a sign, had to remind the president that black people aren't apes. I think he knows that, but it doesn't stop his messaging. But I was glad to see that. And then he got thrown out, and then someone else got thrown out. I don't understand what it takes to get thrown out of that place. Whatever rules are in play, I don't think they're being applied evenly. And I like what's that?
Shocking.
Yeah, I know. Right?
Applied evenly
By this administration, the hell you say. But I don't know. I like the idea. I like the idea that they're boycotting. Are there better things to do? I wish they could have brought in buckets of rotten fruit. I wish more people had spoken out, interrupted his speech, committed that level of insult and insubordination and resistance to reject just because it's just bald faced lies. If someone lies to you with that level of just nonsensical level of bald facedness, it's an active insult. They don't care what you think. They're daring you to disagree. They're telling you because they think you're either stupid enough to buy it or they care so little about what you think about being lied to in your face that again, it's an active insult. It's and you should be insulted and you should act rudely in response, or at least I think there's room for it. I think one of the reasons we're in the trouble we're in is because not enough people tell this lug that he's full of crap and he needs to back that back up out to the road and get off of my yard with it. Not enough reporters do that. Not enough political figures do that, and it gives it all this air of acceptance. It just is implied that since no one tells him, "Hey, that's bullshit," to his face in a sustained way, like you would with anybody else, the moon's made of green cheese and Santa Claus is at the door. You would call the cops. You would tell these people to get off my porch. But no one does that to him, or at least not enough, not nearly enough to my satisfaction. And again, it creates this tacit agreement among the public. Well, he said it. Nobody told him in the same breath that it was a lie, and that's how these bubbles get built. And I think it's destructive. And so I like the boycotting, but I also like the interruption and the shouting. To the point, if you get thrown out, great, get thrown out. I've been thrown out of better places than this. I mean, it's not like they're kicking down the doors and people are getting shot. There are worse precedents. So I like the boycotting. I certainly, I think we need to do as much as we can, as showily as we can, to be examples for others. We're way overdue. It's getting late, and it's later than you think.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would say that, the State of the Union, even its kind of stated purpose of just like, hey, this is where we are as a country. This is the most terminally online like administration ever. We know exactly what they're thinking. They say it all the time. And we can see what they're doing. And so, to your point, like the State of the Union, it could be argued for a long time has been kind of I don't know, a little bit self-centered, but yeah, like if you're gonna lie about what you're doing, then there's no point to have this meeting, um, or whatever it is. And then I think I don't know, and then like there isn't necessarily a need to update us on what they're doing or what they're going to be doing because they talk about it all the time. I will say this is not even cold comfort, but I will say there is some shred of me that does appreciate a narcissistic hour, 2 hours spent in front of people talking about how great he is and all his delusions rather than like, and not that this wasn't there, but it could have been a lot harsher to be like, I'm going to lock up this person and murder this person and whatever these people. So I guess I would prefer narcissism to, I don't know, whatever that is.
What he's already doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't say it, but he's doing it. So is that any better? I don't know.
I just feel like, okay, this is something that somebody much more moderate than me would use to say that to calm the tensions. But I do think there is something about the inflammatory language that is not good for anybody, especially if it's him just talking to his base, right? That it's him, whipping up the choir to go do his bidding even more. At least if they're narcissistic, at least those people can not do anything and just sit in their narcissism or whatever.
I appreciate the point that a status report that is full of lies is no report at all. There's no point. I mean, why? You dead silence would be better than just lying for 2 hours straight.
Well, and I think this is also a problem with the media. The media feels they have to cover it as a two sides issue. So they have to report what he says, they feel. And they have to, say, oh, well, it was this and then they this. And these are two different. No, it's not. There's a thing that is true and there's a thing that is very much not true and is harmful and is being promoted as a side. And that's a problem. that's creating a larger problem that we are all suffering from. I think is a way to look at it.
I agree. I feel sorry. Go ahead, Hannah.
Oh, I was just going to say the fact that he telegraphs everything he's going to do, a standard media reporting on this is what he said, isn't really giving us anything. It's no different than like, sort of a CNN that just reports on the same story, some breaking story for 24 hours. You know, what they need to be doing is going out there and either fact checking or, being like, this is what's actually happening or whatever. There's nothing that's basically, if you're covering what he's saying as if it's neutrality, then you're kind of on the side of his bullshit. So I feel like
Platforming it,
energy
you're
would be the better
codifying it.
spin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're certainly promoting it, and they will do that without ever challenging it. So we do need to wrap up on this segment and move into our first segment of I should say our first issue, and move into our first segment, which is the legal world, judges and courts, etc. And of course, the big story for recently has been that the Supreme Court actually struck down one of his executive orders, the one that was the basis for his tariffs, the tariff terrorism from the White House, with his extending the war in America into the war on the world. And the courts did look at it, said at least in that particular case, it was not, it was unconstitutional. And he was very upset about it, and he attacked the court justices. Some of him, those he appointed himself, and which is his typical thing. He appoints people, and then they say something he doesn't like, and he says, "Oh, Biden, he appointed these horrible people." And then you look back at the tapes, and it's him. It's him announcing the person being named to the position. So typical, typical stuff from him. But it allowed him to have a temper tantrum, and he did. And how horrible the Supreme Court is, and how horrible the decision is. So in response, he wanted to show that he can do it. He can do exactly what he wants to do. And so he re-established a new tariff and just made it global. Just said everybody gets a 15% global tariff. And on the basis of the doctrine of because I say so. And we'll see what happens with that one. I mean, it might take a little time, but it could work its way up its court and get struck down too. So we'll have to see what happens. Anything on tariffs on your mind?
I think that also, sorry, Tom, if I'm jumping in too early on these.
Right.
I think that I guess I have two different parts. One is a bunch of the companies who had to cover these tariffs because they're the ones who actually pay for it, or the consumers really pay for it. It's not a tax on these other countries. A lot of them up and sued the government for their illegal tariffs. But the thing is they're just going to end up with double money in their pocket because if they got charged more, they're going to pass on those costs to the to the customers, who then have to pay more. And then if they sue and get money back, then they're actually going to end up with profit from this. And I can't imagine these companies are going to be like, oh, these things are done. Let us all drop our prices by 50% because whatever. And so it ends up just being an excuse for them to charge more and pretend like they're mad about it. Or maybe they're actually mad about it, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't end up helping the wallet book of the average American. And
Yeah,
then, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I wanted to make that same point, exactly the same point of the companies are talking about suing to get the tariffs back, and everybody says, "Yay, they're doing something that's wonderful," and it's like, no, you don't. The point is, they passed that on already. We're the suckers here. We're the ones who wound up paying it all because they passed the price increases onto us to pay as a consumer, and now they're going to sue to get back money from the tariff. Who the and they'll get away with it, but it's absolutely just a smack in the face for anybody who thinks for 30 seconds about what actually happened with the tariffs.
I can't believe either of you. You're so cynical. So cynical. It's all a plot. Oh, the people with the money are just going to keep the money. And you're so accurate and right. Yeah, I mean, you're telling me this system is rigged so that the rich keeps getting richer? I mean, at least with the tariffs, we got soaked, but it went to the government, which is run by an insane rapist, allegedly. But yeah, and at least with the government, the money was somewhere in the government, allegedly on our side. At least where till Trump can pigeonhole it away in an account somewhere that's not on the books. But yeah, now it's just going to slosh back to the rich people. There's not even talk of trying to distribute it to the people who paid, like Matt said, who paid that we paid for it. Yeah, I'm glad they're going to get their money back. It's kind of unfair that they had to pay it, but we paid it. And there's nobody's even talking about, well, is there any way to get it back to the people? I bet there is. There was plenty of records and exactitude when it was time to pay it forward. Now it's time to claw it back all of a sudden. Oh, I don't know. That doesn't work. Somehow we don't know how to make that happen. I think we know how to make it happen. Just reverse gears and give me my freaking money back. That's how you make it happen. But we're not even talking about that. Everybody is predisposed, spring loaded to just shrug their shoulders and go, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles anyway.
I'm sure it's coming right after our refunds we got from the Doge cuts.
That's right. The Doge cuts and all that, the tariff checks. So I don't know. I told somebody recently the French would have burned something down by now. They would have got this sorted out until somebody somewhere got their teeth rattled enough to stop fooling around. I don't know. And people say you can't go, nonviolence is very important, and it is. It totally is. I understand. I don't exactly understand how it's important, when it pays off, by what magic that mechanism works. I understand that violence is bad. On the other hand, sometimes it's effective, or maybe it's not violence. The French farmers will routinely dump thousands of tons of manure on a state capitol steps to show that they're not playing around, or that they're over it, or just to get their names in the paper and make trouble so that they get their way the next time somebody passes a law they may or may not like.
I heard somebody once dumped some tea in a harbor because they were upset about what the government was doing.
Yeah, right. That's apocryphal. I don't know. That I can't see that being useful.
The thing I will say is I wish that there was some way we could. You said Trump had his little tantrum. I feel like we should stoke that fire. Fascists, they like to eat each other alive, and if we can push and be like, hey, maybe you should whatever at the court, whatever accelerates that.
Absolutely. I've been saying this group has flaws and factions that need to be there are tectonic plates we should be tap dancing on. They're dumb and they're poorly assembled. There's ways we can pit them against each other, like this Epstein file thing. We should have been hammering on that from the word go.
Right.
They're in the Epstein files. They're threatening to release them. You don't see how those are at cross purposes and can be manipulated? And there's people on our side, quote, our side, the Democrat non-Trumpy side, who have the smarts to do these things. And I don't know why they're not doing them. The only thing I can think of is that, it's all these Machiavellian machinations where they don't really want to solve anything. They just want to keep us fighting at each other, trying to solve things while while they snicker and go to the bank.
Well, I think I do think the Epstein issue has been has not been tucked away. I think it has been brought to the forefront. I think it's been continued to it has been kept there, and that's not happened by accident. I think that's by people trying to make it happen. And we're talking about it. Matter of fact, it was an issue from the last segment, and we're still talking about it. So it's not, and we will at least 2 more segments tonight. So I don't think that
with our considerable weight in the culture.
Well, but it's reflected. We reflect a lot of what the main stories are, because although we're not currently a major network, that will have to wait for another day.
Right.
But I think that what it does show is even our little thing has the conscience to make certain that it's not dropped, and that we continue to talk about it. While we're talking about judges, and just before we wrap up the segment on judges, um, and speaking of violence, perhaps in a way, there's a judge by the name of Cannon who has also been in the
Appropriately
news.
named.
Thank you. That's the
He's
best
blowing a hole in the side of justice.
little. Yeah, there you go. So who knows that story is? Who can tell us a little bit more about Judge
Well, I
Cannon?
can tell you a little bit about it. Judge Eileen Cannon is a name known to those who have been watching Trump's legal foibles since before this second administration took place. And she seems to cut Trump a break at every corner. And this week is no different. So Jack Smith's report, she has blocked it from being released. His report about Trump's handling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, allegations that he obstructed government efforts to reclaim them. She has blocked so that those reports can't come out. And unless that gets overturned somehow, it just it's more of the cover up. It's more of the cover up, and it's this justice delayed, justice denied, slow walking. Well, gee whiz, aw shucks, there's nothing we can do about it. Wing of the federal government, when it was Biden's administration to oversee all these things, somehow we got 34 counts on a guy and didn't spend a minute in jail, not on house arrest, not on ankle monitor, none of it. And 3 other cases that looked pretty good to go never made to court. And again, there's no one you can blame. You can, well, geez, the Justice Department traditions, and we don't prosecute, and gee whiz, the election, and all these things. And now look what you've got, though. If you baby talk these, they're like viruses. If you hit them with anything but a lethal dose, they just come back stronger. And to me, it becomes frustrating because at some point the people's work doesn't get done at all for the people. It looks like they're trying. Ooh, it looks like they put up a fight. Ooh, they're we'll get them next time, champ. And sometimes in politics you have to do that. But eventually, it's just an outcome that cannot be tolerated, can't be mitigated, can't be survived if we're not careful. And I feel like that's how we've gotten where we are.
All right. Well,
All right.
we
All that.
are going to move on. And that brings us to our issue of international news.
Did I just chew up and spit out that whole canon thing? Nobody had a word in edgewise. I'm sorry, but international news it is.
Oh, I agree with you about what you said.
There you go. Yeah. So international news. What's going on that we're hearing about from around the world? And speaking of, you brought up France, Tom, and how they react to things. Well, here's one for you. They have banned Charles Kushner as ambassador. I believe this is that related to a certain set of files or documents that are known of? Is that?
I know he's related to a different Kushner that you may have heard of.
Sure.
I'm not following your lead on the files.
Well, why they banned him?
Oh, why they banned him? Well, so there's a guy named Quentin Duronc, and I hope I'm saying that anywhere close to correctly. He's a French far-right student activist, and he got together with some far-left student activists in sort of a protest, counter-protest thing. And wouldn't you know, it came to violence. And Quentin, the far-right student activist, was beaten to death. And so the United States quote unquote diplomacy machine, the State Department Bureau of Counterterrorism posted about political violence and terrorism and sort of tutting how dangerous the left is. When, much like in this country, in France, the right is actually the source, the right wing is actually the source of like 95% of political violence. But true to form, the USA government put out something that was contrary to the facts and kind of meddled with French domestic politics a little bit, propping up the right as if they're blameless and the left as if they're blameful, maybe more than is accurate. And the French government didn't appreciate that. And so they said, hey, Chuck, come on back to the old diplomacy house and let's have a talk. And Charles Kushner did not appear. He sent a flunky, someone below him in the totem pole anyway, in his place, and said something about personal commitments. He had better shit to do. He was going to wash his hair that night. Something. Anyway, they didn't like that, so they snipped off his access to the French government. He can still. The stories I've read is that he can, if he presents himself at some quay down on the Seine, that they can patch this all up together. But he's first got to show up and maybe act contrite. I don't know, but he's got to show up, and he's not big on showing up. So at this point, he is one step removed from access to the French government. His people will talk to their people, who will talk to our people, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the long and short of it, as I understand.
And speaking of people who are felons, was he not imprisoned for a period of time?
He sure was.
He did. He did. He did time. I hate to say I can't remember exactly at this moment what he went to jail for.
Well, Chris Christie, I believe, had picked him up on had charged him in cases down in New Jersey. I think it was about business dealings and
That's what
being issues with money and business decisions and how they were made. And he was simply incredibly guilty. And so it was not hard to find him for that. And he was put in jail for a time, which I guess, as you were pointing out earlier, is kind of a prerequisite for working for the current administration.
I'm reading a condensed explanation here. Charles Kushner pleaded guilty in 2004 to 18 counts, including tax evasion, witness retaliation, and making false statements to the Federal Election Commission. Sentenced to 24 months in federal prison in 2005. Pardoned by Trump in 2020.
It does really seem like now the job requirements on applying to the Trump administration is basically what Charles Kushner got in prison for. They're like, oh yeah, lying to the government, hiding money, great, excellent, you're hired.
Yeah, that's how you build street cred, just like any other gang.
Well, also let's move on with since we are covering international news right now. There's another story out of France, which is their former Prime Minister Sarkozy, who had also gotten in trouble with the law. This was about getting money from Muammar Gaddafi, among others, and used in his campaigns, which is illegal. And he was sentenced to prison and then released from prison for a temporary period in order to challenge the decision. And there's still a chance that he could be returned, but he hasn't gotten there quite yet. And now he's actually got some other charges on him as well. And so he's gone to the court and said, tell you what, if I'm going to have sentences, let's put them together. Let's run them concurrently so that I'm serving everything at the same time and, can get through it quicker. So, French justice?
Hannah, you got anything on that before I dive in?
Go. What is there to say about Sarkozy?
Well, Sarkozy, former French president, and he was sentenced to 5 years for some iffy funding for his last election. Apparently, he's allegedly taking Libyan money, something like that. And then, I felt a little swell of pride when they grabbed Prince Andrew and wrapped him up and then let him drive out to get that humbling photo of him taken. I thought that country, they know how to handle, people in power in criminal straits. They arrest them. Good for them. And I felt the same thing when they wrapped up Sarkozy. Starting to get a little hungry for some political justice, and they wrapped him up and they sentenced him to 5 years. And they sent him to jail. They sent him to the cinder block, hotel du jour. And And I was really like, wow, they walk it like they talk it. He was in there for 20 days and they kicked him back out. He barely got used to the food. He kicked him back out so he could appeal. He could await his appeal like a civilized human being, which is more than I suspect a lot of criminals get. Uh, on top of that, he wrote a book about his time in prison, which he said was a nightmare. He was in there for less than 3 weeks. He hadn't even got the smell of freedom out of his clothes yet. He's writing a book about his trials and tribulations. That's a bit. That's some chutzpah to me.
And then hours 6 through 12. Really?
Chapter 2. My second lunch. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. And now he wants to run 2 sentences concurrently. This guy is availing himself of all the breaks.
Sarkozy he seems like that guy who's, and Prince Andrew, to be fair, just seems like the kind of person who, when they get arrested for something, even though he was the former president, you go, that seems right.
Sounds
I'm
about
all
right.
for innocent until proven guilty, but it's like, no, that checks out.
So cynical.
I
There you
mean,
go.
he was
I don't
also
know where you
buddies
get
with
it.
Gaddafi.
Yeah, right. Good point.
Well, now that we've gotten Gaddafi's name mentioned a couple of times, let's move on to another big name from perhaps from the past and future, Cuba. Apparently, they're next on or on the short list for Trump's attentions, and we're going to have to see what actually happens there. But he's recently said that Cuba is going to get a real blockade. At the same time, Marco Rubio apparently went down there and talked to uh, one of the ruling class there, one of the leaders, and started to talk with them about what they could do to avoid that happening. I assume it involves large checks and certain materials and monies being
Golden
shipped to a
iPads,
particular address.
right?
I'm
Possibly
sure
a jet of some sort.
exactly. Marco had the account numbers with him, no doubt. And it's already. I mean, the Cuba's been suffering from fuel shortages, and Mexico has chipped in and said, we're gonna send relief over there, humanitarian relief to Cuba because things are so bad and things have not. There's not been a loosening of the stranglehold around it. And I believe that somebody even pointed out that Russia sent some materials when Russia's helping you because things are so desperate in your country.
Not a good sign.
You got some real problems, pal.
Yeah,
But
we won't
so
even have gasoline.
right,
Their problems didn't come from nowhere.
this is true. So and there are medical issues as well. And although I understand that there are actually Americans who will risk the blockade to go to Cuba to get some services that are provided, some of the medical services provided there because the skill level is so high. But there's crisis in the economy, lack of supplies and staff, and um, so there's some real troubles down there. On top of now having to deal with Trump's demands and threats as another place that he's going to do something in at some point. The EU. Now, there's another place where you heard earlier about how Trump's temper tantrum from the SCOTUS decision spurred him to bring about a new global tariff. And that was just as the EU was trying to figure out a trade deal to work with America again. But when they heard about the new set of tariffs, they said, we should postpone that vote about trade with the US. So, another unintended consequence that has actually worsened trade instead of made things better is his little temper tantrums and acting out. We can also mention under the issue of the EU, that there were sanctions that they were going to talk about against Russia. But part of the EU is, of course, a collection of countries and a collection of different places, one of which is, for some reason, Hungary. Perhaps geographically an issue, but they are, of course, an ally of Russia, and they will undermine a lot of things. And here's something else that they've put their thumb on the scale over. And so the EU failed to pass those sanctions because of a objection from Hungary. And they even said that they would hold up not only sanctions of and the 90 billion euros, that would be about $106 billion loan, meant to help the Ukraine meet its military and economic needs for the next 2 years. So Hungary helping out. Just the problem is they're helping out Putin. Anything about the EU, and we'll have one or two other things in international news, and then we'll
You
move
know,
on.
I'd like to point out the New York Times had a story out. I think it was yesterday, where they point out that the U.S. was last year. The U.S. was the only major destination in the world to see a decline in international travel. That is to say, everywhere else there's tourism, numbers went up. People are traveling. People are out there spending money. In the U.S., not so much. Not so much. And we used to host a lot of international travel, and it's down double-digit percentages all over the country, 10%, 18%. It's not good. And why? We're sending people to gulags, buddy. People are getting tied up for 3 weeks or so for no apparent reason at all, at least by standards of 18 months ago. Somebody had a bad blog post. Somebody came from one place going to another place they don't like. They're getting tied up in knots. Some of them, and they're getting housed in concentration camps where you can't take a private poo. You can't eat clean food or drink clean water. You can't get your medicine. You can't talk to your lawyer. You can't talk to your wife. And these are for people who aren't criminals. Disney World can go straight to hell before I risk any of that. If they were taking 1 out of 10 people out of line and on their way to Paris, I would never go to Paris. No offense to the French people, but I think they'd understand. I understand. So, yeah, in the world of international news, the United States is missing out on billions of dollars in tourist dollars. And for what? For what? No good reason that I know of. Somebody tell me.
Well, and to this point up here, that's what's happening is people are going to start, they're pretty quickly going to learn. There's so much that Trump or whatever is so obsessed with the U.S. being the center of the world, but it's just going to push people to be like, oh, let's just work around them. We don't need to, we'll get our services from, instead of Amazon, we'll get it from Alibaba, and all this other stuff. And so it's just going to yeah, obviously it's bad enough that it's fascism and that it's this weird American exceptionalism, but it's going to end up just driving all of our stuff into the ground. Who's going to want to work with us when they can, and Trump seems to have this idea well, they'll have to eventually. But I feel like each time they'll just think would it be so bad to cut them out?
Well, and I'll say, this whole thing of the wizardry he brings with tariffs and how it's a negotiating tool, etc. Our next door neighbor and best ally, Canada, he's run he's run away, he's chased them away, and to the point where they've actually gone out and started making deals with China, which certainly is not in our interest, and
Nope.
certainly not something that is that only benefits the Chinese, not only their bottom line, but their alliances in the world and their ability to create future alliances, and that is 100% due to this guy's goofball strategies on trade, allegedly. And he's really helped run our best friend into the arms of the person that, or into the country that he claims is also the biggest threat and biggest concern. So crocodile tears when it happens, but everything you did was what brought it about. And speaking of China, the U.S. is calling on China to disarm its nuclear weapons from having what the U.S. claims are nuclear tests, which, of course, if the U.S. says it, there's absolutely no proof that it's true. But they're also doing that between attacking a military attack on Venezuela and sending warships to close in on Iran to help threaten them about their nuclear weapons program. By the way, a program that we had disabled through diplomacy uh, during the Obama administration, but that didn't suit the current guy who didn't want to have anything on the books that was from that era. So he disallowed
Yeah, he broke the
the
deal.
deal. So that
He
it
broke
could
the deal, and then he bombed Iran and said we destroyed their nuclear program. And it's been what, 6 months, and now we have to go bomb them again to stop their nuclear program. What?
Yeah.
Also, we're supposed to be having peace talks with them tomorrow in Geneva. It's already tomorrow in Geneva. Today in Geneva.
Hi.
You
Break the
know,
ice on that little meeting.
yeah.
There you go. I wonder if the Chinese will take us seriously then.
I'm sure that's what it'll take.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. And as you said, that Heather, Hannah, as you said, that's those talks possibly have already started at this hour, and if not, we'll be starting shortly.
Yeah.
Let us move on. We still have a couple of things that we want to try to catch up on, and this will be our segment, Election Central.
Mostly Texas
And
edition.
this is well, there's a lot of it, Texas. There's a couple other things that have popped up. Um, But it is you do mention Texas, and it does start with that because there's a Texas-sized turnout occurring in the elections down there. They have primaries coming up, and the early voting has already started for the primary. And the first week of early voting has been overwhelming. It's been as much as any of the last 2 or 3 elections, including presidential elections, that have happened, which, as this is a midterm, this is usually a lower turnout type of thing. But because of some of the challenges and some of the excitement that's been brought up about them, the Democratic turnout the first week was over 660,000 votes, which is actually more, is about 100,000 more than the Republican turnout for the first week, which is already something that's gained attention because Texas is notoriously a Republican state. So to have so many Democratic voters, it is certainly worth noting and certainly could indicate something come the general election in November, or at least we certainly hope so. And now that's mostly due to the senatorial race with the Democratic candidates Crockett and Tallarico. And of course, Tallarico's profile, Crockett was already high profile from her time as a congressperson and challenging some of the more outrageous statements and uh, policies of the Republicans. And Tallarico didn't have much by way of public notice until several things started happening to him and around him, preventing him from being seen or campaigning. And then his campaign has caught a little bit of a fire and gotten into the public notice. So between the two of them, the race is is really drawing attention and, more importantly, votes. So that will be good news. Let's hope. Um, there's a Republican side as well, of course, in Texas, and some noteworthy things happening on the congressional level of races. First is in the second congressional district. You may know or recognize Dan Crenshaw, the fellow with the eye patch, who is a Texas Congress member, and famously in his first campaign had a television commercial where he dressed up as a commando, and it showed him going behind the woke lines and his how he was defeating the wokest agenda and getting in there. And well, this time around, he's actually being targeted by someone farther to the right, if that's possible. And it's someone who's already gained some endorsements. Actually, Senator Ted Cruz has come out in support and endorsement of the challenger in the second congressional. So we're going to have to watch that one and see what happens. That fella's being touted by Crenshaw as not supporting one of the governor's anti-immigration bills, when in fact, and that is true, when this guy was in state senate, was in the state level of government, he did oppose the bill by the governor of Texas, Abbott. But the catch is, if you look into it a little more, he objected to it from the right. He objected that it wasn't strong enough and wasn't anti-immigrant enough. So his objections were put him even farther to where Texas might very well like that, might very well respond to that. We are going to have to wait and see, but the second congressional, keep an eye out on that one. The actual election is March 3rd. And what was I say? The way I was putting it is Dan accuses the new guy of not supporting the anti-immigration law put forth by Texas governor and guy who tries to lock the church door and blockade the wheelchair ramp once he's inside for services. Ted's friend acknowledged that not supporting the legislation. He said it was too wimpy for him to consider seriously. So there you jolly well are, Texas. And in the 23rd congressional district, there's this seated Congressman Tony Gonzalez, and apparently he had an affair with one of his staffers, which he later would deny. However, the woman involved actually committed suicide because of what was happening and what was going on. So very serious part to it. And he still denied ever having anything, having done anything. But the husband of the wife, after she committed suicide, decided that he was not the guy to mess around with. And so he got out her texts where Gonzalez talks to her about sexual activities and anal sex and other things that he wanted to do to her, and her saying, "Stop it. You really need to stop doing this." And his ignoring her, just like he's ignoring the charges. So the husband made it very plain as to what's actually going on. And so, let's hear what happens on March 3rd. We'll find out the sort of Republicans Texas wants to have represented between the 2nd congressional and the 23rd congressional districts. Keep your eyes peeled on those. And Gonzalez, of course, being a seated congressman, this is an issue that has been brought up to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. And let's roll that clip.
Mr. Speaker, why should Tony Gonzalez resign, given these very serious accusations?
There are serious accusations, and it must be taken seriously. And I've told him he's got to address that with his constituents, and he's in the process of doing that. Is my understanding. There's an investigation in the state of Texas on these matters, and has been going for some time. And the Office of Congressional Conduct has also, it's been reported, they've been looking at it. All of that was news to me. But I think, as in every case like this, you have to allow the investigations to play out and all the facts to come out. I've been intellectually consistent about this. Whether you're talking about Republicans or Democrats, you have to let the system play out. If someone, I was against, for example, the expulsion of George Santos a while back, because he had been accused of a crime and indicted but not found guilty. If the accusation of something is going to be the litmus test for someone being able to continue to serve in the House, you'll have a lot of people who would have to resign or be removed or expelled from Congress. So I think you've got to allow this to play out. I think it is very serious. The allegations are clearly very serious. And Tony Gonzalez will address it. I think he will.
Does he deserve to win re-election? Does he deserve to win re-election?
See you later, guys.
Okay, so I'm going to point out in part the response that these are serious accusations, and I've told him he has to talk to his constituents about it. And in fact, he has. He has talked to his constituents, and when asked about the texts, he says he works hard for Texas. So he is addressing his constituents, and he is telling them what he's doing as far as he perceives himself being a hard-working congressman. And of course, it has nothing to do with the actual allegations and nothing to do with the actual alleged activities. But that's Republicans. They can sell themselves any way they'd like. And as I said, we'll see how Texas defines itself on March 3rd. Any other thing on that before we move to the next election thing?
No, I'm utterly unsurprised at Mike Johnson's refusal to stand up to any principle or anything but hypocrisy.
I'm not sure that saying I didn't want to jump the gun on George Santos makes him seem like a great, like a great thinker.
Right. He's so even-handed.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah, fair point. Well, let me just mention that primary elections on March 3rd include Texas, but are not limited to Texas. There's also elections going on in Arkansas, and those are primaries. And then there are two special primary elections up in Massachusetts, one for the state Senate, the 1st Middlesex District, due to the death of Senator Edward J. Kennedy, and one for the state representative of the 5th Essex District due to the death of Representative Anne Margaret Ferren. We'd like to offer our condolences to the families and friends and constituents of those elected officials who passed away. The next set of primaries after Texas and Arkansas on the 3rd will be Illinois, and they'll have their primary on March 17th. So things are moving forward with election. Oregon House Republicans, speaking of political issues and election issues, what's going on? Oregon House Republicans staged a walkout as gas tax election, gun control votes near Republicans began. As those votes are coming closer, they decided to boycott the House. And then shortly after, the Oregon Senate sent their chamber a controversial bill that would reschedule a referendum on transportation tax and fees increases from November to May. So how long will the Republicans boycott, I guess, is the issue. Or the fact that they're boycotting from doing their job. Perhaps that's an issue for someone. I don't know. And one other issue for another state, there's down in Maryland, they're considering redistricting and the whole grand redistricting palooza rush of 2026. They have been considering doing the same. There's one congressional district with a Republican in Maryland, and they were going to change things up to put that in play. And the New York congressional leader, Jeffries, who's a House leader, a U.S. House leader, He was encouraging them to do this. And Maryland's governor and the Maryland House are all supportive of this new map and getting that moved through. However, the state Senate president, a Democrat, says that he will not hold a vote on the plan, that he feels that he doesn't see enough votes in the Senate to even hold a vote. Whereas Jeffries and Westmore, the governor, and the House are all saying, well, we'll know if you hold a vote. Go ahead and hold it and see if there are the votes or not. But we won't know until there's an actual vote. And he says, not happening. So we'll see if that moves forward or that's dead in the water. And that's your Election Central Report from PolitiPod Live. Remember, go get registered and go vote whenever there's an election. We're going to move on to Epstein's slow boil. I wonder if there's a graphic for that. Oh, look at that. There's
How about that? Every expense was spared for this delightful graphic meant to depict Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew, their quote-unquote likeness.
clearly Jeff Epstein is one of them, and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is the other one, although not the frog.
Well, I mean,
Well, it's a slow boil, you understand.
Slow.
the frog could be a prince. Or a former prince, as it were.
You got me there.
It's all coming together.
Yeah, I didn't even pick that on that, but yeah, you're right. And when you're right, you're right. Speaking of those who should be boiling, there's a lot of talk about who's in the files, and looks like there's a lot of people. And Bill Gates just came out and apologized for the affairs that he had, the two affairs that he, or at least the two he acknowledges from when he was married and related to, I guess, related to being on the island. And Andrew Windsor, the guy we were just talking about, that guy right there, the one in the, who's not the other guy there.
Exactly.
He was arrested, and it was related to Epstein and the Epstein files, but it wasn't what everybody knows he also did and is guilty of and should be charged with. But it was some other stuff that related to providing financial information to Epstein before others got it, and he was sort of smuggling the information over to Epstein, and not very secretively, because people knew it. Everyone knew it, and in fact, it was talked about. However, while his mother was alive, Queen Elizabeth, she was very protective, and she made certain that no one did anything to Andrew. However, she's dead, and there's a new royal on the throne, and that's King Charles, and that's his brother, and he says the law is going to take its course. So Andrew was arrested on the messing around with the financial information, and there's a now famous picture, a more famous picture of him leaving after having been arrested. In the back of the car, you could see the lights actually reflecting red in his eye, and he looks really scared, and that's really, really good, because he should have been that scared all along for decades. But at least it's happening now. So we will see what happens as that case moves on, but it's also another fellow, Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson he was called, who had been involved with labor governments over a long time, and Gordon Brown, during the Gordon Brown tenure as a minister, that he would he was passing on, he was also passing on information to Epstein, financial stuff. So there's a lot of talk about this illegal passing on of information, and if that gets him arrested, well, that's a start. So nobody's going to argue that that's not a good thing.
Aside from the karma of Prince Andy getting what's coming to him at long last. I love the idea that we're cracking open new eggs on this thing, and every time you pick up one rat, another rat might scurry out from underneath it for having been exposed to the light. I'm mixing several metaphors here. Don't stop me now. And I feel like once they press this guy, who's not used to being pressed, or at least not in this way, I'm hoping that he'll squeak out to save himself. He'll squeak out something that others can use, and on to the next person, and so on, until everybody gives up everybody, and this godforsaken knot of lies and shadows and blackmail finally gets cracked open. We're not going to get past it until we do. If it stays secret, it stays a problem. So I'm hoping that breaks loose, and luckily for us, it's starting to catch fire with other governments that aren't corrupt like ours, that aren't concentric circles of protection of each other like ours. And so again, I rejoice at the prospect of new things coming to light, new things that maybe will make other rich, untouchable assholes who gave their wife syphilis or gonorrhea unbeknownst to her and wanted to give her antibiotics also unbeknownst to her, maybe make them admit that they had sex with some Russians way back then, at least after they're caught, then they admit it. But that better than nothing, I suppose. And I remember all the smug little smirks on Bill Gates when he was on the cover of Time magazine and Business Insider or whatever, and he's just looking at the camera like, I've got all the world on a string. I know all about everything, and I am a giant colossus astride the earth, and just you can't stop the guy. And all the while, he's out there catching STIs from Jeffrey's hired help, and God knows who else. Maybe he's out there with doing things that we suspect he was doing. So anyway, just the puffery. I can't take it.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that, as this net of rat eggs, as Tom said, expands out and catches more and more people, that we don't get desensitized to like, oh, everybody was a part of it. No, let's grab more and more people, like this is not because, I think as you said, and I think as we've seen more, like if nobody falls for this, first of all, it could, the infrastructure is all possibly still there. It's still going. Maybe it's just him dropped and another person is going. But if not, we have to be aware, like, that this did happen, that it absolutely could happen again, that it could be happening right now. And so, yeah, I think that we need to dig as deep as we can and see who else is involved. Yeah.
There you go. With the old clock on the wall, I wonder if we should go ahead with a Trump dump or if we should just skip right out to the outro. What do folks think?
Trump is still terrible. He's as terrible as you think. I'm sure we'll have much to talk about next time.
We can always pass that. And I will mention one thing very quickly, which is that there was an armed man who entered Mar-a-Lago who had a shotgun and a second weapon with him. And he was shot dead by security, whether it was a Secret Service or the sheriff. It was, or perhaps both. But certainly when you enter uninvited and with a shotgun, the welcome you'll receive is just about what you would expect.
I'd like to point out that he's a white guy from a Trump-loving family, with the DOJ in this country, lying first and asking questions never. It's really important to underline the fact that, much like in France, our most of our political violence comes from the right, and let's stop kidding around.
Excellent point.
Yeah, I think that connection to France is really important, to be like, it's obviously not that there's never been violence from non-white people or people on the left, but let's talk about it in realistic terms. It is like heavily a specific subsections of people.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And we will certainly bring that up some more in our next episode. But for now, I think we should move on to the Epstein count up. As you may be familiar if you've joined us before, we have a count up of the days since the unredacted Epstein list has not been released. And it's day 3,907 and counting.
Which is probably the number of people we haven't yet discovered.
Right. Too true. Too true. More than that, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us for PolitiPod Live for Political Talk. You're welcome to join us every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here for PolitiPod Live. And if you want political laughs, you can join us and a half dozen of our friends for our monthly political comedy podcast, PolitiPod. You'll find that at soundcloud.com/PolitiPod.
This is Tom Bickle.
Hannah Soldner.
And Matt Nisanoff saying goodbye.